The preseason testing for Formula One is no doubt a very exciting time, not just for the fans, but also for the drivers and teams. This is the time when people have a lot of expectations and high hopes before the season kicks in. But sometimes, things can go wrong in the testing period that are just weird, from car crashes to misplaced drivers and much more. Keep on watching as we list 9 of these occurrences. At number 9, we have the reveal of DAS. On the second day of preseason testing in 2020 at Barcelona, viewers noticed something strange in the onboard footage for Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes. While on the sight track, the British race driver was seen changing the toe of the front wheels by pulling on the steering wheel, then pushing it back, just before turn 1. James Allison, who's the technical director for Mercedes, was happy to reveal that it was called DAS, dual axis steering. But when he was asked about the purpose of DAS, he chose not to answer. He only said that it was a new idea and was supposed to add an extra dimension for the steering and the driver. But the hows and whys were something they wanted to keep to themselves. Mercedes did not have any issues with the legalities of DAS, as they had been in communication with the FIA for a while, though Allison did admit that the FIA had rejected the first design, which was lever actuated. But they confirmed that if it was done using the steering wheel, it would be legal. Now we have number 8, absence of Lotus. British Formula One racing team Lotus was the second fastest in 2012 at the first preseason test at Jerez. Swiss-French racer Romain Grosjean was at the wheel and he completed 1,111 miles. But to everyone's surprise, after completing only 20 miles early on in the second preseason test at Barcelona, they announced that they wouldn't be participating in the remaining 4 days. The first issue came up as Grosjean was approaching turn 1, the part of the circuit which requires the highest speed. Due to an issue with the suspension mounting, it wasn't able to withstand the loads and the chassis got damaged. The mounts were made of lightweight carbon fiber, which proved to be too weak to handle the task. Because this was Lotus's second E20 chassis, the team used the first chassis at their factory to replicate the issue. This led them to dropping the manufacturing of the replacement front suspension mountings that they were supposed to use 8 days later at the third preseason test. Next, we have Williams Racing, a bit too tardy. It's usually not a big deal when teams get a late start on testing, as they do tend to do it on purpose. Racing team Williams, however, had confirmed plans to be at the tracks on the first day of testing in 2019, but the car hadn't even left the factory when the tracks opened, and it was still missing essential parts at that point. The car only got ready on the third day of preseason testing, with George Russell completing 23 laps and setting a time that was just 8 seconds off the pace. His teammate Robert Kubica completed 48 laps on the 4th day, but overall, the team didn't really get any impressive work in on the first test. The second test went much better, with the car running more reliably and covering 1,385 miles. But even then, the team's best lap was still 2 seconds off the pace. The disappointing streak didn't end there, though. They also had to get the car's front suspension design and wing mirrors replaced before the opening of the Australian Grand Prix. It wasn't a big surprise when the team didn't score any points that season. Next, unpredictable weather. Weather issues are to be expected since preseason testing almost always takes place in the middle of European winter. Rain is pretty common, but there are other issues that come up as well. Snow isn't that rare either, with Spanish race driver Fernando Alonso even running in it in 2005 at Silverstone. A couple years back in 2018, the third day of preseason testing was made almost entirely useless because of a mixture of snow and rain. A total of only 17 laps were logged for that day. If F1 chooses to use their locations for the testing, weather issues might still be a problem. Sandstorms struck in Bahrain in 2021 and also in 2009 at the same venue, ruining a test involving Toyota, Ferrari, and BMW Sauber. Now at number 5, an unsure start to the V6 turbo hybrid era. There was a lot of anticipation for the preseason tests at Jerez in 2014, as this would be the initial on-track appearance of the 1.6-liter V6 turbo hybrid cars. But when the tracks finally opened, it was a disappointing start. Lewis Hamilton went on to complete a speedy installation lap in the Mercedes, which had been shaken down earlier at Silverstone. But it took a good 2 hours and 20 minutes before he managed to become the first driver to complete a flying lap. His running came to a sudden end after 19 laps when the car had a front wing failure, though his mileage still made up around a fifth of the total laps that had been completed that day. Only 93 laps were managed between the 8 cars that had run that day. Red Bull and Caterham couldn't manage to set a lap time. McLaren wasn't even able to leave the garage because of hydraulic and electrical problems, and Marussia only left the UK base to come to the tracks the morning of the testing. It was hard to believe that only 47 days later, the teams would be in any state to compete in the Australian Grand Prix. Next up, Marussia and the virus. Marussia had gotten off to a shaky start at the first preseason test in 2014, so it had to be really careful with mileage for the second one in Bahrain. Unfortunately, that's when Trojan malware infected the systems and made it impossible for it to run pretty much the entire first day. This only made things more difficult for the struggling team. While Jules Bianchi did manage to get 3 installation laps in later on, Marussia didn't really get a chance to recover. With one problem after the other, it only got in a total of 29 laps over the 4 days of tests in Bahrain. Team principal John Booth counted down the issues they had run into, saying it had started with the disaster of the virus, which had cost them a lot of time. While their second day was decent with 17 laps, they again lost most of their third day because of an engine issue. The final day also had a series of small mishaps that caused a lot of delays. Now at number 3, the Red Bull Daniel Kvyat accident. Having spares lying around is pretty normal for F1 drivers, as it comes with the territory. But that wasn't the case for Daniel Kvyat and Red Bull during the preseason testing at Jerez in 2015. Australian race driver Daniel Ricciardo passed the keys to teammate Daniel Kvyat for the second day of testing, but because of the cold weather and tires, the then 21-year-old spun out coming around turn 2 and hit the front wing of the car on the tire barrier. Red Bull didn't have any spares available, so it couldn't repair the car to run for the rest of the day. Working with what they had, they sent Kvyat back out to do what he could do, even with the front wing and the supports missing. He managed to get in 18 slow laps, but couldn't set a lap time. It was clearly no secret that Kvyat's mistake had cost them a very valuable testing day. Next, Alain Prost in disguise. Alain Prost was fired by Ferrari towards the end of 1991, so he was left without a drive in the next season. But he was being considered by the French team Ligier, and he had even tested their cars out a few times pre-season. Wearing fellow driver Eric Comas's helmet and white overalls, he rode the Ligier Renault JS37 at Paul Ricard in disguise and showed off an impressive pace. Since keeping his test secret became impossible, he went for the next one as himself. Though he did very well at Magny Cours, Paul Ricard, and Estoril, he still missed out on the deal that would have made him a big part of the team because of a lack of backing. Now, we have the Fernando Alonso mystery. Though most of the mysteries surrounding the test crashes in the past years have been solved, there's one that still hasn't. That is the mystery of why Fernando Alonso crashed into the inside wall of Turn 3's exit on the last day of the second preseason test. There were a lot of theories, from him suffering a seizure to being electrocuted. Things only became more confusing when Ron Dennis, boss of the McLaren team, denied that Alonso had a concussion, only for him to miss the first race of the season because of being in the hospital for 3 days. Dennis later stated that it was an unexpected gust of wind that had destabilized the car and sent it crashing. Later on, Alonso finally had the chance to speak on it and said that there had been a steering issue. He did say that they couldn't pinpoint it to anything specific, but there had definitely been a problem with the steering in Turn 3. That's a wrap for this video. See you in the next one.